You wanna?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very special panel here at Big Bad Con Online. Love Persevering, exploring grief through performance. Before we dig right into the meat of this panel, we're just going to go around and do a quick round of introductions about who we are, what this is all about, and why this topic means so much to us. So hi there, I'm Connie Chong. My pronouns are they, he, and she. I am an actual play game master and a TTRPG designer. I am probably best known for my work as a game master and showrunner on Transplanar RPG, and I'm accompanied here by my fantabulous cast for that. We are an all-transgender, people of color-led, dark fantasy actual play channel telling stories set in an original non-colonial anti-Orientalist multiverse. And we stream Saturdays at 8 p.m. US Eastern Time. You might notice this is a Saturday. We're taking today off to focus on this panel, but we'll be back next Saturday with the continuation of our current arc. And I'll pass introductions along to Mr. Love Wins Valiant Dorian.
Hello, everybody. My name is Valiant Love Wins Dorian. I use he, him, his pronouns. You can find me all around the internet at Valiant Dorian, or also Spirit Bear. Please enjoy that lovely treasure I just set you on. I'm a TTRPG AP performer, Twitch writer, streamer, TTRPG talk show host, and on Transplanar, I play Sayir, who uses he, they pronouns, and is our misbeloved twin brother of the Chosen One, which will be very relevant. Handing over introductions to Kai.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kai. I use he, they, and she pronouns. You can find me everywhere as Estelle of Imladris. I am a TTRPG performer, game consultant, costumer, costume designer. I wear too many hats. And I also have the sincere pleasure of playing Mr. Zanin-ish on Transplanar RPG, who uses he, him pronouns, and he is our sad dad cowboy, which will also be relevant in a little bit. I'm going to bounce on over to Sam.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Star. I use she, they, and the occasional they pronouns. You can find me all across the interwebs at Lust for Life X. I am a TTRPG self-proclaimed chaos fairy and performer. I also am known for playing our resident favorite, our chronologist, our healer, Lumira, who uses she, her pronouns. And she deals.
I'm tapping X to doubt. I'm tapping X to doubt if you're dealing about Lumira dealing about anything.
She deals, which will be very relevant. And I'm gonna pass it along over to our dramaturg.
Howdy, everyone. It's me, C. My name is C. Sorry, that was a weird one. I use they, them pronouns, and I am indeed the dramaturg, producer, and your favorite Artemis here on Transplanar RPG. You can find me making very trans, very gay art across the internet at C Plays RPG. But hey, you know, this is really what I love to do, and we're going to get into why I love to do it and all of the ways that I adore everyone here. I'm very excited, and I will pass it over to the boss, the panel, the game master, I suppose. Connie, it's you.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you, Steve.
I know, I'm sorry. It was wild.
It's all good. It's me, the boss, the panel game master. So I'm just going to read out the description of the panel to kind of get us situated into the topics and themes for the afternoon for us here on the Eastern Seaboard. So in this panel, the cast of the Chaos Protocol, that's us, we're going to discuss what grief means to us, how we perform and embody tragedy, how we approach play as catharsis, and methodologies of safety. We'll examine what it means to build together toward tragedy in an actual play, and how our practices may overlap with and differ from exploring themes of grief in home games. So there's some content warnings for this panel. We're going to tackle some pretty heavy themes in very explicit ways. So if you're like, whoa, okay, that's hitting a little too close to home, feel free to step away for this panel for any reason. So content warnings for this panel may include grief, tragedy, trauma, and discussions about the death of children, parents, friends, siblings, and pets, which may include the discussion of death of minors, like youth and kids in terms of children. So yes, keep that all under advisement. And with that out of the way, let's just get started with our first question that I have for my cast for this evening, which is, how does grief inform your artistic practice, especially in the context of your identity? So basically, what does grief mean to you as a person and as an artist? Anyone who has an answer can feel free to jump in and respond.
One of you has to go first. I'm
Sam.
throwing that
Go,
question
Sam.
in for the audience. It's you,
Ha!
Sam.
Go.
Oh, okay. I guess it's me. I wasn't planning on being the first one. I was getting ready to say I gotta think, but I'm getting put on the spot now. So this is
No,
what I do.
If you gotta think
on the
If
spot.
you gotta think, we can go.
Oh, it's totally fine. I think what grief means to me specifically, grief is intrinsically a life experience. Like, you don't get to, it's very rare for you to live on this earth as a human being and not experience some type of grief to whatever, to whatever degree that you do. And I think when certain things happen when you are trying to find yourself, and when things happen that really shape and warp your perspective and your viewpoint and how you move in the world, that's changing to you as a person on your most subconscious level. So I would say grief is a life experience. It's also, I hate to say, it's also in some way, shape, or forms like you need it to learn how you need it to shape you, I guess, in a sense, is what I'm trying to get at. I think that'd probably be my answer. So
That big resonates.
yeah. And I think that when you have those things that happen to you, you become, it makes you more, to me, it's a reminder of life. It's a reminder that you are still here, and it ends up coming out in like the most different of ways. So I think in relation to how it informs me as a player, is the same way it informs me as a person. It's something, it's a stepping stone. It's something that resonates and allows me to change and grow and adapt.
Yeah, lovely answer. C and or Kai, would you also like to respond?
Okay, so I was having big thoughts about this. And I think that specifically in regards to my identity, because I fully yes to everything Sam just said. But specifically bringing it down to identity, I was thinking like there are 3 like buckets of grief that I think I lean into pretty heavily as a performer that all are attached to my identity. And like one is the like personal grief of losing people. I've lost family members, I've lost friends, and it's like that grief is something that I explore constantly. And grief that I've carried for much of my life of losing family members, grief that I've carried from only a few years ago from losing friends and loved ones. And it's like that, obviously, as a person, no matter what I do, that's with me. And so through exploring aspects of it in storytelling, I get to look at it, talk to it, hold it close, and also share it. And that's very meaningful to me, getting to maybe not directly talk about people that I love that are still with me, but also share them and share that experience, especially with people who get it. The next one being like the queer experience. And I think that every queer person under the sun is always grieving not having what the heteronormative world offers in some way, shape, or form, even though we could be thriving and happy. Like when we were born, largely part of the whole thing about being queer is that you're told you're going to have these benchmarks in your life, and that's just not true generally for queer people. I feel like there are some people who get a similar, like parody to that experience, but it's never going to be the like 1950s nuclear family. And as an American raised, in America by people who that was their experience, like that isn't mine. It wasn't one that was expected of me, but it wasn't given to me. And so grieving an experience that maybe I thought was the world that isn't. And then the last one being my cultural heritage experience of the like lived generational trauma of being Japanese American, and using my cultural heritage as a like large discussion of grief, and something that I think I work on and look at and hold and talk to and yell at and hold, like fully cry into in every character I ever play.
That's really beautiful. C, what about you?
Oh boy. This is a classic transplaner thing where I'm just immediately going to start crying, which I think is fun and cool. So contextually, this question is so interesting in terms of like, how does grief inform my artistic practice in context of my own identity? Because I remember at some point in my life, probably when I was like 20, I'm 27 now for context, I remember having this kind of like pivotal aha moment, so to speak, where I looked around and I was like, I am too young, or I feel like I am too young to have lost so many people and to be so deeply entrenched in grief. And this realization being like, oh, this is never going to stop, right? And understanding that and being like, this is something that will be with me for my whole life. This is something that has been with me for my whole life. I can't agree with Sam and Kai more about the different ways that grief looks, right? Grieving experiences, grieving people that I wanted to be, grieving things that I wanted to have that I didn't, grieving people, grieving memories, grieving dynamics, right? All of these things are so like intrinsically linked into who I am as a person that it becomes foundational. I'm not able to think of myself outside of the way that grief sits inside and with me all the time. And I think that's part of like what it means for me also to come to terms with my identity the way that I would with my transness, with my queerness, right? With every other aspect of who I am. To know that is, I'm not trying to fight that, right? Like, it's like, I can do things to support myself, right? So that this does not consume me, the way that I also think about depression, right? Like, but there is a way that I need to see it for what it is and to recognize it as a part of me that I can't remove from myself, and understand the ways that, as Sam said, that also enriches my way of being in the world and being alive, right? And I think that is a really pivotal moment for me to be able to deal with the weight of it, right? Is to contextualize it as something that's a part of me. Otherwise, it feels like too big and too heavy to hold a lot of the time. So in terms of artistic practice, that is constantly a part of myself that is screaming to the surface in everything that I do, whether honestly intentionally or not. Like, that is something that I always carry with me, the way that I carry every other part of my identity. And something that I don't think I will ever want to lose, because it would feel like losing a part of who I am. And that's really important to me to recognize, and as like a core and central part of my identity is I've started to say, like, I am somebody who is, I'm queer, I'm trans, I'm grieving constantly, all the time. It's never stopped. It's never going to stop. And to understand that as part of my journey of walking through the world and walking through life, and that art is the way that I share who I am as a person. And so that always will come out, and that will always be at the forefront.
Very beautiful responses from all of you. What about you, Val?
Everyone's given such amazing responses. So I am going to take a hot second to just like retweet everything that everyone has said. I think the only thing that I would add to the idea of like grief being not only in many forms, but also kind of like illuminating different sort of emotions or spaces that kind of exist as part of its existence. And the thing that I want to tap into is grief as love, and grief being a form of love, and a lot of stories about grief also being love stories, and also being stories that are full of memory, love, and care. And that's always been something that's very, very important to me. I've always loved love stories, any type of love story. It doesn't necessarily have to be romantic, it could be platonic, sibling, familial. And all of those like manifestations of love also explore grief. And there is an element of this idea that like seeing the facets of love and all of the different ways it can manifest, and one of the ways that it does is through grief, and that is a huge way of how I kind of interact with it as a performer, is not only showcasing the idea of, yes, grief is painful, grief is something we carry, it is forms a huge part of one's identity, of one's experience through the world. It manifests in so many layers, whether you're queer, whether you are someone of a marginalized identity who has experienced the horrors of imperialism and colonization, if you have lost someone. But it is also the attachments we make, it is the bonds that we have, and it is all of that love that will continue to exist, because if grief sits with us and informs a part of us, then the love that it's linked to also stays and forms, and we carry that with us too.
You all are
have
so
a
smart
little-
and have such massive brains. Go ahead, Kai.
I have a little like thing to kind of add that Val just kind of sparked in me that I kind of forgot to say, but like one of the things that I think is really important to remember is that grief is not just death. Grief is
Yeah.
not just an experience you didn't have. Grief is also like I went through a thing a couple of years ago where I lost a friend that was very close to me, not because she died, but because we're not friends anymore. We had a big falling out, and like grieving the relationship that was very precious to me, and grieving like opportunity, grieving all of that stuff is also so important. And it's something that I think people miss or skip over because it doesn't feel like the big capital G grief.
Yeah.
But even micro griefs are so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adding to that as well, a couple years ago, I like a huge form of grief that I do carry with me is the fact that I had to leave the States at one point and leave a lot of the like love and connections and community that I built and life that I had built just in almost like a blink of an eye. And that is also a manifestation of grief. It's like, to retweet Kai, it's not just capital G grief, it's not just death, it's also opportunity, it's life. It is a sense of normalcy that you once experience, it a relationship, anything. And we carry that with us, all of us, even if you haven't yet, if you folks in the audience, if you haven't yet experienced the capital G grief yet.
Grief is a reminder that you have loved well and deeply.
I have thoughts. You all have such big brains, and it's sparking thoughts in my own big brain.
Share with us
so-
your brain, Connie.
Yes,
Give
I
me
will.
your brain.
I'll let you nom on it. So I think a lot about preemptive grief as well. Like, it's something I've written about before, not super extensively, but it's part of what informs my artistic practice for Transplanar as well. Like, there will be moments during really mundane snapshots of my life. Like, I'll be driving to the grocery store, or I'll be like doing dishes, or I'll just be showering, my mind is wandering, and I'll suddenly be seized with this deep, inconsolable, massive sadness because I'm reminded of the fact that one day my mom's gonna die. You know, one day my cat's gonna die. You know, one day my dad's gonna die, and that's just how it is. And there's nothing I can do about it. That's just the way of life. People will die. People that you love will die. And I'm reminded of this interview by, of all people, Andrew Garfield, who, you know, whose work I actually really enjoy, where he talks about losing his mother in this interview and how he was like inconsolable after, like he didn't know what to do with himself. So he ended up just like, he just ran along like a beach in like the middle of like the fall or something. It was not like a temperate time. And he like dove into the water, right? He dove screaming into the water, just submerged himself into this water. When he came out, he felt better. He was talking about how up until that point he like was completely lost, but something about plunging himself into the water and then screaming and releasing that animal sadness like allowed him to process it and allowed him to like be kind of like continue the step of grieving, right? Beyond being stuck in that one place of just like, oh my God, what do I do with myself? And he said something in the interview that really stuck with me about how he thought about how in the history of time, in the history of humanity, sons have always been losing mothers, and it's so much better that that's the way it was for him than the other way around. So, oh my God, I don't know why I'm tearing up.
Me too, though.
Oh my God, like what the
What do you mean you don't know why you're tearing up? I know why you're tearing up. I could tell you why.
And that's good, right? It shouldn't be a scare. It's a deeply sad thing, right? And it can be a scary thing, but it's not anything that needs to be avoided. It's something that I want to be able to face head on when it happens to me. And that's why I explore grief in my art. It's a way for me to kind of prepare myself for that happening eventually, and surround myself with the lessons that I know I will need to experience firsthand. And I still know it's not going to be enough. I still know I'm going to be inconsolable and, all these things, but at least now I can kind of like go through the motions of knowing what it's like to have a community and have love to help support me through that process. Oh my God, Jesus Christ.
No.
I'm going to,
I feel like
I'm going to tack on to that. Because
Please go
you
ahead.
brought up a really good point. So it's no surprise I lost my father about 3 years ago. And it was before I had even came into the TTRPG space. And I was a daddy's girl, still am. He was my number one. Only man in this world, only straight man in this world that I will love for the rest of forever is my father. And that hole that you can find yourself in when you lose someone that meant so much, meant everything to you. It's really hard to get out of. And I didn't really even find that until I started playing TTRPGs, to where I had a way that I could compartmentalize my grief and work on it in chunks and let that out through my characters as I was going through things. And it ended up changing everything. Like it was at one point it was like, I will never stop feeling this way, and I don't know how to make it stop. It's overwhelming. And then finding ways to let those pieces out through my characters, through playing TTRPGs, where I don't want to say that it got easier, because it never does. That never, you never shake that, right? It just kind of gets less painful as time goes on. And it's only been like 3 years since like my dad's passing, but I'm in a much better place now with sitting with his loss than I was back then prior. And I think because I loved him so much, because he was such a light in my eyes, that it is something that can feel like it's swallowing you whole. So having that release in whichever way works for you, for Andrew, it was him screaming into the water. A good chunk of my characters that I've played over these past 3 years have been me trying to come to terms and make do with it. And I also gained some amazing friends that helped me along the line too in this. So yeah, that I thought about that, and it just kind of
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to share, it reminded me of a moment bringing back to TTRPGs and their importance to contextually. a few years ago, before the pandemic, my grandmother passed. Very, very strange woman. I say very affectionately, who I loved so deeply and so dearly, and who I knew very little about in a lot of ways. Her last words were, "I will see you in the broccoli fields beyond this world." And when I found out, I was living in Minneapolis. She lived in California, and Connie and I were at the library picking up our library holds. Connie had gone in, and when they came back, I was crying in the car. And I remember you asked me, Connie, like what I wanted to do, because we had D&D later that night. We had our home game in Minneapolis later that day, and I was like, I'm gonna bake a cake. I'm gonna cut off all my hair, and I'm gonna go and we're gonna play. And that is exactly what I did. And that ability to hold for this strange, beautiful woman who I love so dearly, a strange, beautiful way of grieving, in its complexities, in its tragedy, in its everything, is something that never will leave, right? And I carry that with me constantly, right? And it comes out constantly. But I think there is such an important way in which we find new space around the grief. When like the grief comes, it's almost like an eclipse, right? That like comes into your life, and then everything is the grief, right? And then it's not putting the grief away, it's not moving the grief, it's not shifting it away. The grief never gets smaller, but your life, that rim of light around the grief, right, in terms of an eclipse, starts to get a little bit bigger, right? And finding ways with other people where that can grow is really meaningful to me.
I think that for me is bringing something about artistic practice and about culture, where I think there's a lot of cultural taboo around grieving and around sadness and tragedy and loss and death in particular, especially in like the West, where it feels like a thing. We see it represented in media and whatnot of it being like a lonesome activity, right? Like the grieving widow, she's in her huge house alone. And like there's the wake, there's the funeral, people come and go, but then it's just her, or something like that. Or like the grieving man grieving his like fridge wife or whatever, right? Like in the story. And I think I think it's in moments where we feel the most alone, and sometimes when we lash out and we push people away the most is actually when we need people the most, right? It's just so scary. It feels so scary and vulnerable to share that with people around you. But I think like part of the process, and I have to remind myself, because I'm someone who pushes people away when I'm having a hard time. And I need to remind myself that when I'm grieving, when I'm having a difficult time, it's the most important time to like let people into my life and allow them to help hold me through the process, right? Because it's a matter of survival and it's a matter of healing for me to be able to do that. I also think that in terms of exploring grief in TTRPGs, I feel like I've been in situations where I've seen people shy away from it, or they don't want to tackle it because it's hard, it's difficult, and it's risky. Because when we're tackling questions and stories about grief and loss and sadness, like the safety that comes in with that becomes so much more elevated. And when we also add in the vector of we're AP performers, we're doing this for an audience, that's another layer of risk. We're improvising around these extremely heavy themes that are deeply personal, right? And so there has to be trust at the table that we're all building toward the same thing, and that we all have these safety valves to fall against. We have the X card, we have these safety tools at play. Yes, these are important, but I think just as important, if not more important than just the specific tools we're using, is the play culture that surrounds the particular table. And I'm so honored and so privileged to have built and developed a play culture with all of you in the Chaos Protocol, an ongoing conversation, an ongoing process, not an end state, but an ongoing negotiation, right? Of being able to explore these themes in a way that feels brave to all of us and feels like we're not just bleeding everywhere with no one there to like hold us or help us, but that we're doing this very intentionally, very thoughtfully, and in a way that is good instead of rupturing for us. But I want to hear what you have to say, Kai.
I was mostly gonna say actually like kind of it really tags onto that I think wonderfully, which is that like one of the things that I find beautiful about the practice of sharing grief through storytelling and especially through experiencing it with others is I've sat with and known a lot of people who have experienced really big capital G grief, some of it very suddenly, some of it very fresh, some of it old, long, and still difficult because it's still grief. But sitting with people who are grieving, specifically people that I never knew, or working with, telling stories with, experiencing the art of someone who is processing, working with, or carrying grief, I get to know the person that they're grieving. And I find that through actual play, I see the shape of people's grief in such a way where I get to know the person they're grieving. And in that way, they're sharing that story. They're sharing that person with me. And to me, that's actually a huge privilege. And so to be able to tell stories like the one that we tell in the Chaos Protocol, seeing people's grief, the shape of what they fear, like almost their shadow self, but also like the grief of the people that the actual performers have actually lost. I get to know Sam's father through the shape of what she gives, that, you know, C was talking about the eclipse. I see the silhouette of the grief, and I get to then know that beautiful person that gave that light. And that is so powerful to me to get to share in that. And then to also know that when I'm experiencing my grief, my dear friend that I lost suddenly, people get to know. Because I talk about him every session in the Chaos Protocol, even though I never say his name.
Damn, Kai. Fuck.
I
I'm sorry,
gave
I'm
you
sorry.
with the big
That one
emotion
got me.
bazooka.
That one got me good. That one got me good. It's beautiful, I think, and so important. Is something that we've been touching on a lot in Arc 2 is the ways that it is, in my opinion, it is so much worse to have a ghost that doesn't haunt you. Like for that to be gone. Being gone, I think, is the worst kind of grief, and that's the scariest part for me. And the part that sometimes feels the hardest, right? And this idea that grief is a continuation of memory, right? Because they are still with me, right? When I am holding them in that way, right? Like the people that I've lost, you know, still speak to me and still speak through me, in the ways, and my love for them will never be gone, even when I also am no longer a part of this world, right? And I think that is so special and so beautiful, and that that contextualization, Kai, means a lot to me. And like the way of like you will know the strangeness of my grandmother through the way that I am as a person and the way that I play. The characters that I play, you will know her, and you will know why I am, because she also made me. All of my friends that I have lost have made me, right? The grief that I hold has made me, and you will know me better for it, and you will know them better for it.
That's really beautiful. Excuse me while I just lay down and cry. But it's that's kind of a really beautiful way to put it, Kai, is like knowing who the person is, the person that's grieving, and who that person they are grieving as well. Because if you know me, you know my dad. We are very much alike. So it's I hate to say interesting, because it's way more than that, but I think it's really beautiful to look at it, contextualize it in that way. I'm gonna hold on to that little nugget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good thing to hold on to. I think this is a really lovely bridge into our next question, which is about where do you find fruitful emergence when performing tragedy and heavy subject matter in actual play? I feel like we kind of already touched on this, but I'd like to invite us all to explicitly address this. So if anyone has an immediate reply, I'd love to hear. Otherwise, I'm going to start calling names.
I prepared. I would like to share, I think, one of the most important texts that I have, a phrase from a important text that I have ever read that is constantly informing me on on an artistic level about why I do this. I'm going to share it. This is a quote from, I know this. I pulled it out of my freaky deaky little dramaturg inspiration board that I have at the backstage for Translator. So this is a quote from Anne Carson's Grief Lessons. And it says, "Grief and rage, you need to contain that, to put a frame around it where it can play itself out without you or your kin having to die. There is a theory that watching unbearable stories about other people lost in grief and rage is good for you, may cleanse you of your darkness. Do you want to go down into the pits of yourself all alone? Probably not. What if an actor could do it for you? Isn't that why they are called actors? They act for you. You sacrifice them to the action, and this sacrifice is a mode of deepest intimacy of you with your own life. Within it, you watch yourself act out the present or possible organization of your nature. You can be aware of your own awareness of this nature that you are never at the moment of experience. The actor, by reiterating you, sacrifices a moment of their own life in order to give you a story of yours." And there's a lot in there. And I think the parts that always call to me is the line of, you can be aware of what it means and resonate with the grief in a way where no one has to die, right? And in a way that you get to experience what it means to grieve, that you are never able to really contextualize artistically in the moment of actually grieving, right? Like, it is so hard to do that. You have to be in the process of grief when you are in it. But when you are performing it, you get to hold it and navigate it and play it and understand it and further understand yourself while in that process, right? And I think there's something beautiful about sacrifice and action and this idea that unbearable stories are good for you. Right, to see, because it helps you understand yourself better when you are in unbearable grief. So I wanted to share that first. I'll probably have more thoughts once we all go, but that is something that is constantly sitting with me when I think about what it means to take on a story like this. And why, right? That it is for us and it is also for anyone who sees themselves in it.
And if folks would like to think for a bit first, I have a response to that, which is, I think a lot about why I am drawn to dark fantasy in particular, and why my brand of performing, embodying, and creating dark fantasy, I think, is very different from normative dark fantasy, where there's there's terrible things that happen constantly all the time, and it's just kind of well, it's dark fantasy, what do you expect, right? SA and abuse, really violent sexist abuse, right? There's always sexism. Why is there always sexism, right? There's always transphobia. Why is there always transphobia? There's always racism. Why? All these things. And thinking about my motivations for building the Transplanar multiverse as a non-colonial anti-Orientalist multiverse where there's no racism, there's no sexism, there's no transphobia, right? There's no, all of these isms and phobias and systematic modes of oppression aren't uninterrogated fixtures of the world. And, trans as a syndicate, which is an organization in the Chaos Protocol, Transplanar Reification and Nourishment Syndicate, is kind of in some ways a trans utopia. Everyone there is trans and your gender can be whatever you want and people use all kinds of pronouns and it's, it's transnormative. And yes, that gesture from me is an act of love, right? A love letter to all of you as my players, a love letter to my trans and queer audience. It's very much rooted in love. But I'm also kind of coming to terms to the fact that it's also deeply rooted in grief. It's me grieving what I'll never have with my family. Right? It's, so I'm building out something in play and in this shared imagination space that will allow me to access the kind of love that I wish I had, right? Because I know, like I know that certain people in my life are never going to be able to see me for the real me, for the me that I want to be seen as. But here, maybe I can pretend at having that, which is why in media, I never cry. I'm not really affected by stories of homophobia. Like there will, of someone coming out to their parents and the parents are like, fuck you, and they throw you out on the street. Like, I'm like, oh, that sucks. I hope this character gets better. I'm rooting for the character, but it doesn't affect me. I'm actually more deeply affected when the parents accept the children, right? I'm more deeply affected when they're able to find belonging because I'm like, and I'm crying because obviously I'm happy for that character, but I'm also crying for myself because I don't have that and I won't have that. And those tears are not anything I want to run away from. I want to process them. I want to experience, some kind of meaning. That's why I make art. I want to experience meaning, right? And meaning, I think, is a value neutral thing, right? I think it is a deeply human instinct to want to create art. I don't know. I guess I just wanted to. It was fun. It was nice. It felt good. Maybe it showed me something about me. Maybe it was a mirror. Maybe it was a homunculus. Maybe it was a knife. Maybe it was a love letter that I'll never send because the person I want to send it to doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, I'd love to hear from the rest of you.
Yeah.
So I just caught strays, just unnecessarily.
Yeah,
but
that shit hurted.
Hey,
that shit hurted.
Cuddy. I had a moment very recently of very fruitful and very healing emergence, actually on our show. As I've become an adult, spent a lot of time thinking about my Japanese American identity. My grandparents passed away when I was very young, my Japanese grandparents. And my grandmother was interred in a Japanese internment camp. If you don't know about Japanese internment, go read. But my grandmother was the matriarch of my family. My grandfather passed away when I was really, really young. My grandmother passed away when I was almost an adult, like late teens. And she and her sisters were like the legacy of Japanese internment in my family. They were wonderful women who shared a lot of their lives with, creating beautiful big family of Japanese Americans who all love each other very much. But I didn't get to know my grandmother as an adult. I did not get to experience what is an intrinsic grief in my family, in my culture, through the eyes of the person who actually experienced it. And I felt very removed from that grief. And literally 2 weeks ago, we had Erika Ishii on our show as a guest. And I've never played with another Japanese American person as a performer before. And there is a scene, you can watch it, you can almost time code the moment where I'm punched in the soul by the communal sharing of grief, of loss, and what that love and community looks like on screen. You can see it happen. It is a story I purposely put in Zainin for me to explore. And so it was extremely fruitful as the person who loves Zainin Esh and his story. It was fruitful for me as a storyteller in general, but specifically like on a personal level. It was the sudden realization and unlocking of a grief that I got to share with somebody in a moment of storytelling that I find little pockets of this. This is probably just the most recent and very profound one of being able to speak my grief into a place of community where it is heard and seen and held. And then I can go, wow, I said it, and I can move forward in my grief with that.
Ugh. Oof. Oof. I'm not Japanese American at all, but what I am is a Black American. So hearing that separation, and like that separation of grief, of not being able to fully feel that, is rough. It's rough for people of color and people of marginalized communities that are living within Western borders where where so much of this foundation is layered in our ancestors' blood, right? So it's almost like just being who you are in this world is a physical representation, a physical manifestation of grief, right? Like I am walking grief because I am descended from slaves, right? I am walking grief because this is what happened to my family and my people when they came here as well too. That's having a community and having people that see and feel and reflect that is so, I don't even really have words for how soothing it is and a balm to my soul to being able to explore these personal parts of me without the threat of the outside world, if that makes sense, right? Like it is a very fine tailored space for me to work through the complexities of those feelings and of that grief and of those relationships without having to worry about real life consequences to navigating those complexities.
That's huge. No, I think that's, it's play, right? Like tiger cubs play with each other to learn how to kill later and hunt, right? So, it's you're removing the stakes, but you're still cultivating a valuable and necessary skill, survival skill. We have just about 4 minutes left, so I would love to just send off with maybe in addition to your outro, maybe like one final parting thought about all of this that you would maybe like to share with the audience.
Can we hear Val's answer really
Oh my
quick
God,
first?
yes, please, Val, please. Give us
I need it. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Okay. I guess my answer is threefold to this, and they're all kind of stemming from the incredible quote that C's already shared with us. And it is the idea of fruitful emergence manifesting as engaging with some level of truth and being able to tap into it as a performer. One of the major emerging themes in Chaos is for Sayir is the loss of a sibling, and that is for me. I'm very very close to my brother, and there's a lot of like tapping into that preemptive grief, that preemptive truth of what it's like to lose a sibling that's incredibly close to you. And in terms of like the scaffolding that C said in the lovely quote, I find that in dark fantasy, in the show that we're producing, poeticism and the drama that we cultivate together is that scaffolding. It is actually, as much as it is a way to intensify and dramatize and make a really engaging piece of storytelling, it is also safe. It's safer to talk about grief in gorgeous language because it's safer that way than to get real and messy and informal about it. And that is very, very fruitful and also very, very safe and comfortable. And my final thought on that is that can only exist when you have a team that knows how to collaborate and consistently works. I always remember the last episode of Arc 1, where we all just held each other and we negotiated and we talked through all of our boundaries and borders. And I think that's what makes our telling of grief so powerful, is that we get to do that safely and resonantly.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Thank you so much for sending us off with that, Val. I'd love to do quick round of introductions, maybe in reverse order, and maybe give us like one parting thought about grief or about performance or safety, anything that you might like. Let's start with C.
Hi, everyone. My name is C. I use they, them pronouns. I am the producer, dramaturg, and performer of Artemis on the Chaos Protocol and Transplanar RPG. Watch me grieve. You will do it. I am doing it. Watch how I still love. Watch how grief is love. Watch how it's always love. And I'll pass it over to Sam.
Hello, everyone. I am Sam Star. I use she, they, and the occasional they pronouns. Grief is a part of me because I exist. Kai?
Hi everyone, I'm Kai. I use he, they, and she pronouns. I will commit more crimes. And I think my parting thought is share the grief. Share it. Because you are just one bucket and it is an ocean. And that's what we're all here for. And it is not a tall ask. It is an act of love to share your grief.
Hi everyone, I'm Valiant Doran. I use he, him, his pronouns. You can find me all on the internet at Valiant Doran or at also Spirit Bear. Please enjoy the lovely treasure I just set you on. And my parting word is you are everyone who has come before you. You are who you are now, and you are everyone whom you are with and love and care for right now. Boss?
Oh my god, you all have such beautiful parting words. I was sitting here with crickets in my brain thinking of nothing. I've been Connie Chong, your game master, panel facilitator for the evening, pronouns they, he, and she. Just obligatory plug for Transplaner. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/transplaner, at Transplaner RPG. We're also on Twitter, and we stream on Twitch Saturdays at 8 p.m. US Eastern Time. Resuming Arc 2 next Saturday at 8 p.m. US Eastern Time. We'd love to see you in chat for that. My parting thought about grief is, there might be suffering written in your blood. For me, it's famine, there's mental health, there's depression, there's suicide, there's so much like national level suffering when I'm thinking about my ancestors and the people who came before me in China. But there's also love, and there is persistence, and there is survival, right? And you're here for a reason, right? And there is a story within all of us that hurts and is full of sadness and loss, but that needs, I think, to be shared in some capacity, because I think that is for me the ultimate act of love for the people around me and for myself. Right? This is a reminder to me to not, thank you, Kai, to not have to keep holding this all to myself and to let other people in and to share it, which is why I do actual play. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Please continue to enjoy the rest of Big Bad Online. Follow all of these amazing people across social media. They're incredible artists. Listen to them, follow them. They're amazing. Watch their performances, tune into what they do. Give them money, give us money. As trans people of color, please support our work so we can continue to do this. We love you all so much. Enjoy Big Bad Online. See you on the flippity flip. Goodbye, transplaners.
You can say goodbye?
What?